So let me tell you a little bit about my morning. Well, actually, let me go a little bit earlier than that. So last night, we had our Gourmets for God game night. And there we had a great time. There was lots of laughter and lots of eating and some wine drinking that occurred throughout the night. And by the time everyone left the event, and those of us that were hosting the event had actually cleaned up and restored the fellowship hall, it was pretty late. By the time I drove home and was finally able to fall asleep, it was well past midnight. Now, for some reason or another, well, I guess I know what that reason was, I woke up and I needed to go to the bathroom. Probably more than you wanted to know. But I did. And so I reached over and grabbed my phone to see what time it was, and it was 4:30. Now, that's not actually highly unusual for me. I very often get up around 4:30. So it's not really that big of a deal. But it was highly unusual that there was a text message waiting for me. It was Reverend Andy, and he expressed that he was experiencing a stomach bug and that he was going to be unable to speak this morning. Now, in that moment, I experienced what might not be every minister's nightmare, but it had been mine. Finding out that the person that was supposed to speak wasn't going to be able to speak, and that I, in the 11th hour, needed to step up and do something that I had not prepared to do. My worst nightmare. I apologize if some of you came only to hear Reverend Andy. Heather is right now locking the doors. You're here now. So in that moment, I realized that I had to find some peace. If I was going to be able to do this, I had to be able to find some peace within me and keep the nerves at bay, right? And that's not always been very easy for me to do, to find that space of peace. Because when I was really young, I had an experience, and at that time, I was around 5 years old, and that 5-year-old told herself that she had to be perfect, or the people that she loved in her life would leave her. So I lived from that belief for a very long time. Can you really feel that there could be absolutely no peace when you were living your life from that underlying context? How could there be? How could there be? I walked around on eggshells all of the time, trying to be to everyone what I thought they needed me to be, even when I had no idea about what that was. Even when, as I got older, I understood that changed from moment to moment. And if there were two people that I loved in the room at the same time, what they needed could have been 180 degrees from each other, and yet I was trying to do it. Yes. Get an amen. So in 2005, I went through the breakup of a 4-year relationship. My mother made her transition, and that the breakup was in April. My mother made her transition in June, and my beloved cat, Jack, whom had been with me for 18 years, made his transition in October. So as you can understand, 2005 was a very interesting year for me. And by the time the season of peace on earth, goodwill to men came around, I really knew that it meant for everybody else, but not for me. And like some of you, I really had no concept of peace to fall back on. I had no idea what that was. My life really wasn't working for me at that time. Seeking something else, I returned back to my spiritual home, which I had kind of retreated from, trying to like cocoon myself through all of these challenges that was 2005. And I realized that doing that was like a really big mistake and that I needed to go back. And so I did. This was at the time I was living in Chicago. It was what was then the Chicago Center for Spiritual Living, now the Bodhi Center for Spiritual Living. And so I found myself sitting there in the sanctuary one morning, and I watched as this woman that I didn't know entered into the row just in front of the row that I was sitting in. And I was filled with immediately with what I experienced as peace. Now, at the time, I didn't really understand really that was peace or what I was really experienced. I only know that that's how I perceived it. I only knew that I knew, but I didn't know how I knew. In that moment, I said to myself, from this moment on, I choose peace. I choose to feel what I am feeling right now. I choose peace in all of the experiences of my life, all of them, the highs and the lows. This is what I am choosing in this moment. Now, I've been not always successful at it, sometimes more successful than other times, but always this has been the underlying context, the underlying intention of my life, to choose peace. What I want each of you to know is that you don't have to experience something like I experienced to know peace and to have it manifest in your lives. What I've really come to understand is that the essence of peace was surrounding me and within me all along, even though I didn't really recognize that until later. What I began to understand was that those moments that I sat in meditation, that I was able to really quiet my mind and to relax into my chair, that I became oblivious to the world outside of myself. That the moment that I watched a sunset over the ocean, in the exact time that sun first dipped into the water, and I felt like this overwhelming feeling of completion. Or the times that I'm with my friends and the long hours of laughing our heads off are finally dying down, and I look at each one of them with so much love in my heart. Or the moments that I would lay in a big pile of leaves in the middle of a crisp fall day, but sunny, on the wind-protected side of the house, and just allowed myself to take that all in, to simply be in the moment. Or when I was swimming in the ocean and I felt that the water surround me and really support me, and I wondered how life could get any better than this. those were the moments that I recognized as peace, that I understood and could take with me into other moments. So these kinds of moments, or ones that you have from your own experience, are the times in which you really allowed the peace of God to flow through you. You were present in the moment, and that you invited the presence of peace into the experience. That you recognized that this was a really important feeling, and whether or not you called it peace in the moment, that you were aware of the presence of something that just felt good. What I finally understood was that these external experiences didn't bring me peace, but because I was in the moment, present to the moment, then I became peace. That I became peace itself. My invitation is that you become aware, or become more aware of those moments in your own life. That you really allow yourself to really experience them fully. To allow them to expand in your heart and your soul, and to spill out into all arenas of your life, spill out over all of the people in your world. For as we do so, we will literally be being the presence of peace, and as we know from this teaching, we can only experience that which we are willing to be. As within, so without. There's a Buddhist story called The Burden. And apparently 2 monks were returning back to the monastery in the evening. Do they call them a monastery? I always thought that was for nuns. Why would they be going there? Never mind. Back to the story. 2 monks were returning to the monastery in the evening. It had rained, and there were puddles all over the roadside. At one point, a beautiful young woman was standing along one of the sides of the road, unable to get across because there was this really large puddle in front of her. So the older of the 2 monks went up to her, lifted her up, and took her over to the other side of the road, where he left her and continued on to the monastery. In the evening, the younger of the 2 monks came to the elder monk, and he said to him, "Sir, as monks, we are not really supposed to touch a woman, right?" And the elder monk nodded and answered, "Yes, brother, that is true." Then the younger monk asks him, "Well, then, sir, how is it that you lifted that woman on the roadside?" The elder monk smiled at him and said, "I left her on the side of the road, but you continue to carry her." Continually hanging on to the past, like I did for so many years, to our stories, like I did for so many years, to our beliefs, our feelings, our judgments, our shame, our guilt, or any other emotion that we might be experiencing about something from our past will never leave room for the experience of peace. Never. Not being in resistance to or denying what happened, but having certainty behind us that we are exactly right where we should be. Remembering that the presence of God is within us and that all is unfolding perfectly. The invitation is to keep that idea, that truth within us in the present, and to let go of the past. Before my beloved cat, Safari, who made her transition this last year, I had the opportunity to watch her and her brother Cash throughout the day. I have irregular hours, shall we say. So they used to spend really long hours each and every day just really basking in the sunlight that would come through the many windows that I have in my apartment. And they spent a lot of time like wrapped up in each other's arms or whatever, or laying on top of one another. They were so cute together. Just really, really totally oblivious to anything else that may or may not have been going on in the world around them. Just being who they are and who they were created to be, right? And when they did that, they were at peace. They were calm. They just had this, they were just living in this space of serenity. It was just a joy to watch. Except for 2 hours of every day. One in the morning from 3:30 until 4:30, and the other in the afternoon during that same time frame, 3:30 to 4:30. These are the hours just before the automatic feeder would send their food down into their bowl. I think you're with me here. So it's the only time during the day that they were beside themselves. They would pace back and forth outside of the laundry room door where that feeder was. They would run back and forth between me and the feeder. They would be peeking. The cat door had like a plastic thing in the front that was see-through and clear through, and I would watch them as they peeked through that little cat door looking at that feeder. They were talking all the time, especially Cass. Meow, meow, meow. Like, I don't know what you're saying. And the whole time, all I could keep thinking about was that I really believed that all that they were feeling in those 2 hours of the day was fear, doubt, and worry. I know that I can tend to anthropomorphize things, but don't you imagine that's what they were feeling? Fear, doubt, and worry. Are we going to get our food? Have we been good enough? Are we deserving? Is the feeder working today? Is it going to work today the same as it's worked all of the other days? Is there someone else inside that laundry room that's going to snatch up all of our good before we have a chance to get it, if we're not in there so that we can get it first? I could really go on and on. Now, the bottom line is that the only time that they are standing outside of peace is when they're worried about the future, whether or not they're going to be fed. Trust me, they have never not been fed. Do you get that? The invitation is to have certainty about what is before us. We have never been alone. God is always there. The universe is always for us and never against us. So the invitation is to invite in peace by being firmly grounded in that truth. This brings me to the idea of unity. This is a piece, P-I-E-C-E, of this conversation that we need to be reminded of. A piece of this teaching without which none of it would make any sense. A piece of our spiritual path that we need to be fully grounded in as we create the experiences of our lives. And that piece, P-I-E-C-E, is that we are, each of us, a piece of God. Like a piece of art from a particular artist, different from the other expressions in his or her collection, and yet, like the others, wholly containing the essence of the artist itself. like a particular piece of clothing, integral to the whole ensemble, in such a way that without which the look would be entirely different. Or like accepting a piece of pie, fully within our free will to accept either a large piece or a small piece. It's our choice. This idea of peace, P-I-E-C-E, the who and what we are spiritually at our core, must be recognized and accepted as the truth before we can talk about or be the presence of peace, P-E-A-C-E. Ernest Holmes says there is a universal mind, spirit, intelligence that is the origin of everything. It is first cause. It is God. So in the beginning was God, the I am presence. And out of that presence, that God stuff, came everything else. We are therefore, each of us, a unique and individualized expression of the divine. The reality is that there isn't God and you, or God and I. There's only God. Only God, made manifest as each and every human being, as each and every sentient being, as each and every rock, as each and everything. There is not a place where God is not. A unity that can never be broken. What I also know is that since we were created by God, out of God, that we have a spark of the divine within us. A spark that contains the allness of God. Not a little bit over here and a little bit over there, but all of God in its fullness. Made in the image and likeness of God, the kingdom of heaven is within us. So, like a hologram, each expression has every aspect of God within it. There's nothing missing anywhere. Joel Goldsmith says, God is the creative principle, the source, the activity, and the law of our being. And our being is God in expression and manifestation. God, our inner selfhood, is the quality, the quantity, the cause, the reality, and the substance of our being. All that God is, we are. You with me so far? So, can you in this moment agree with me that one of the qualities of God is peace? I don't know that I heard everyone. So if you're not sure, could you at least be willing to entertain the idea that peace must exist at the very center of everything, or else the universe would be in chaos? Yes. Excellent. Regardless of any situation or condition that appears otherwise in the world of form, the spiritual realm is perfect. If the spiritual realm were not perfect, not the presence of peace, it couldn't exist for a single moment. It would be in chaos. Can you also agree with me that if God is peace and I am all that God is, then I too must be the presence of peace? Yes. Thanks. And that if that's true for me, then it also must be true for each and every single one of you. Yes. All y'all at home, too. Peace is this inner calm obtained through knowledge, a knowledge or recognition of our unity with God, our relationship with the universe. We must know that we are eternal beings on a spiritual path, and that in order to experience peace, we must have that certainty behind us and before us. In Discover the Power Within You, Eric Butterworth gives his very metaphysical interpretation of the Sermon on the Mount. In the sermon, Jesus talks about transformation, and we've talked about some of the verses before in the past. But for those of you that might not know, this is an 8-verse poem that's been called the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes all of them begin with the word blessed. Now, this is a very special word, which means to confer prosperity upon or to enrich. In the spirit of transformation, what Jesus is actually saying with each and every single one of the verses is that we will experience this if we condition our minds, if we fully embody and practice the Beatitudes in our everyday life. So this particular Beatitude is, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Now, what Eric Butterworth says about this Beatitude, the peace that we desire and need in this world is that which passes understanding. It cannot come by treaties or agreements or by wars and boundary lines. Peace can only come when men and women become receptive to it and become peacemakers in the process of expressing it from within. Call yourself a child of God and believe it, and you become a true peacemaker. It is not a thing that you have to, there is not a thing in the world that you have to, it is not a thing you have to do in the world around you. In the most dramatic way, the world around you will be changed in the twinkling of an eye as you change. An electric light doesn't have to go out into the room and try to sweep away the darkness. When the light is turned on, the light radiates and the darkness disappears. Now, while this isn't always easy, it can really be just as simple as that. Be awake. Be aware. Know beyond a shadow of a doubt who and what you are. Affirm that birthright. Stand in the perfect now moment. Don't worry about the future. Don't fret about the past. Be the presence of peace as you allow it to move through you. And then simply stand in awe, whether you understand it or not, as the outer experience of your life, of all of our lives, as the life of the planet becomes one of peace. It happened just like that for me this morning. And so it is.